Welcome, everyone, for the latest episode of Dollar Bin Bandits. I'm Joe Marcello, joined always with my pal, Orrin Phillips. Today, we are honored to have a comic book artist and legend, Ron Frenz, with us. Thank you so much.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for having me, and try not to be too honored, because I will fail.
No, I'm always honored to have people who work on the comics that we adored growing up, and it's just fantastic to have you here. So we sincerely thank you.
Sincerely thank you for enjoying the work, and I had a great time being part of that too. So I'm happy to be anywhere.
As are we.
So how did it all begin for you?
Well, I think my mom and my dad loved each other very, very much.
That's a good start.
Okay.
They always had 2 children and decided that maybe it was time to have another.
Okay.
So
I like where you're going with this.
I think there was wine involved, and perhaps an episode of the Ed Sullivan Show. I don't know for sure. I like to think I was conceived on a Sunday night. No, I grew up with a brother 3 years older, and so there was the earliest comic book we can remember is from a 1964 World's Finest. Okay. So if it was 1964, I was only 4, but he would have been like 7. So he would have been responsible for that comic book being in there. And from that time on, I was fascinated with comics and comics art, and I drew from before I can remember. I don't remember a time when I didn't draw. So I was always fascinated by it. I discovered Marvel through the old Spiderman cartoon and the Marvel superhero cartoons, and so from the time of the time I was like 6 or 7, if you asked little Ron Frenz what he wanted to do when he grew up, it was draw comics, work for Marvel Comics, and draw Spider-Man. And because I am the luckiest SOB on the planet, I was doing that at 25.
What was it like walking through the door of Marvel as a fan?
I never walked through the door of Marvel as a fan. I'm trying to remember the first time I went to the offices. I honestly don't remember which experiences were the first and which was, because I went, one of the first experiences was going in for the Marvel Christmas party and just going in earlier that day and things like that. Actually, the first time might have been for the Spiderman Summit. We had a Spider-Man Summit during the couple of years that I was on Spider-Man with DeFalco. That might have been the first time, and I got the $2 tour and everything. It's fantastic. But you're never not a fan. I mean, you're never. There's never a moment when if you're standing in a room with John Romita that you're not fan first, and the idea that he turns to you and asks your opinion on something doesn't blow your mind completely. So that that's to the betterment and to the not so betterment of the industry, that fans started becoming pros and all this, and the best fans turned pro are some of the smartest, best people we've ever had in this industry. Your Mark Grunwalds and your Roy Thomases and your Tom DeFalcos and things like that. But then we also have fans turned pro who never really get the pro part down as far as what their job is and doing it efficiently and looking at it as a job, as a function. And I've always worked very, very hard to try to be the latter, but I'm sure I fall into the former occasionally.
It happens.
But yeah, I was so fan for years. Jim Shooter's from the same hometown. I'm from Pittsburgh. He's from Pittsburgh. We had a couple of conventions. I showed some early stuff to Ron Wilson. He was here at a show, and he was the first pro to give me some feedback. And even at that point, I wasn't doing storytelling yet. I was just doing, splash pages and figures and things like that. So he gave me some really nice feedback. Arvell Jones was also standing off to the side, if you remember that gentleman from his work. And then another year, I showed my stuff to Marie Severin. And again, I still was not doing storytelling. she had a lot of confidence that I could. And she wanted me to go to Jim Shooter, who was also a guest at that show, and get a sample plot. But I was scared. I didn't feel like I was ready yet. So that came later. And finally, Shooter was doing a shop appearance here in town. And I had graduated, I think I had graduated art school at that point. So I had friends who said if I had spent some time producing some storytelling, finally, and I had some friends who threatened that if I didn't show them, that we were all going to show portfolios. If I didn't do it, they were going to hurt me. So I showed them my portfolio and mailed that stuff, Xeroxes of that stuff to Marvel, and it sat in a drawer for about a year before I got the phone call. I was working at a local animation house that does local and regional animated television commercials, and I got the call at the office. I was still living at home at the time. I got the call at the office from my mom saying, somebody named Al Milgram is trying to get a hold of you from Marvel. Here's the number. So I called him back, and he handed the phone to Louise Jones, and that's how I got my first couple of Kesar fill-ins. So, and I stayed with the animation studio until they offered me Spider-Man. And then so for a while there, I was doing my day job at the animation studio, which to the credit of my boss at the animation studio, Rick Catazone, when we weren't really busy, he didn't have a problem with me working on my Marvel stuff, which was great. Made it possible. So at some point in that first couple of years, I was working a day job at the animation studio and was working on any number of titles up through Team Up. I was working either on Kesar or Star Wars or, an Indiana Jones fill-in or Marvel Team Up before I finally decided to pull the ripcord and go full-time into comics. So, yeah, that's the thumbnail right there. That's how and then 35 years later, I'm being interviewed by you guys.
I just have one question about Star Wars and Indiana Jones, because they are, licensed motion pictures. Were you given, told, okay, you have to make it look almost exactly like the films, or were you given a little more freedom to do what you want?
Well, on Star Wars, they had already had a run by Carmen Infantino and Gene Day, so nobody was too overly concerned with likenesses, as I remember. I mean, I was sent reference and everything, but also when I was hired, they had just come off the run with Walt Simonson and Tom Palmer, and Tom Palmer was staying. So I was hired with the understanding that I was primarily going to be doing layouts and the storytelling, and that the final look would be up to Tom. And he continued the consistency between, Walt and I. So, I mean, I would work off of, I had photo reference of the main cast and all that kind of stuff. And, but a lot of this stuff, I mean, the final look of the Millennium Falcon and things like that were things that Tom Palmer had already pretty much developed and had set for the comic look. So I was a little, I was free of worrying about that kind of detail and everything. But I enjoyed that run. Working with Joe Duffy was a dream. Everything I learned about professional cooperation and creative partnership and everything came from my time with her. She's a dream to work with.
How important is that, though, for an artist to have that kind of
I think some kind of connection is important. I mean, I've worked on plenty of gigs where you never talk to the writer. I don't know if I ever had a phone conversation with Bruce Jones. I may have had like one or two phone conversations with Bruce, but he was writing like little short stories. So I was kind of thrown in on the deep end. They weren't even broken down like a Marvel plot. They were just like little short stories, and it was up to me to break it down into 22 pages or 20 pages or whatever it was. And so I was learning as I went, and I was getting feedback from Louise Jones, and her assistant editor was Danny Fingeroth. And it was a great learning laboratory, that kind of thing. By the time I was working Marvel style with Joe, we had a lot more in the way of back and forth phone conversations and got to know each other as human beings. And she's a terrific lady, and I loved working with her. I loved the sense of humor that the strip had under her, and I enjoyed doing some of the lighter comedy bits. and I love the characters. I mean, I was, the blonde, blue-eyed kid, so Luke Skywalker was my jam, that kind of thing. So she used to accuse me at conventions just to get a rise out of me. She used to accuse me of, there was a thing where Al Williamson used himself as a model for Han Solo in the newspaper strip. And she goes, well, I have a feeling there's a blonde, blue-eyed illustrator that uses himself more than he uses Mark Hamill as a model for Luke Skywalker. That was never true, but she had great fun teasing me with that. And she sounded nothing like that either. So.
Well, the resemblance is uncanny, though.
Yeah, right.
Now, there's something I want to talk to you about, and that is the new universe. You did Kickers Incorporated. Now, for those who don't know, New Universe was an idea Marvel had for their anniversary that they're going to start fresh. It's a brand new universe. It's not tied.
To celebrate the 25th anniversary of the Marvel Universe,
right?
We're going to create a new universe, which made everybody kind of go, huh? But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. What was internally, what were people thinking about this? Was it met with okay, this is going to be great? Or was it kind of like, all right, well.
What it was met with was this was Jim's baby.
Right.
And nobody really knew what it was. I mean, I'm in Pittsburgh, so I can't speak to where the communication breakdown was. But I know I wasn't really getting much. I mean, when DeFalco pitched Kickers, it wasn't even called Kickers. The original concept, the working title, it wasn't ever going to be the final title, was Mr. Magnificent and his Team Supreme. Okay. And it was very much a tongue-in-cheek, Challengers of the Unknown kind of a thing. Tom loved Challengers. I love Challengers. We love that, seat of your pants. Let's not take it too seriously, fighting Mongu, the Living Island, and all this kind of stuff, And that's what it was. But as he pitched it, he went ahead and put it on the stack of things that were being considered for New Universe. But when we found out what the New Universe was going to be, when Jim became more laser focused on it's going to be the world outside your window, and we're going to show piping and wires when you break down a wall, and we're not going to have any science that's not already established in scientific journals and things like that, Tom went, oh, well then you don't want Kickers then. And Jim said, oh, I do. I want a sports book. And Tom said, Jim, now it's not a sports book. I mean, I don't know that much about football. Ron doesn't know that much about football. It's just, that's what the characters do, for a living, that kind of thing. But now he insisted that he wanted to see Kickers. So what we ended up doing was taking what was a big budget, tongue-in-cheek adventure and making it a TV movie for the New Universe.
Right.
And we were still happy with our final result. But even for like our second issue, There's a Robot in My Rose Garden, I took Shooter's mandate very seriously, and I went looking for what was being done in robotics at that time. And everything that I came up with was out of a scientific magazine, and he still pushed back on it. And it's like, no. But it couldn't help but still have a little of the feel of an old Simon Kirby book, because that's really what Tom and I wanted to do. So we were kind of always working at cross circuits and stuff.
But as a young guy, how did it feel to be assigned a book that was going to be this, part of something brand new? Were you nervous? Were you? I
was nervous. I mean, we had. I think it was around. Wasn't it around the same time that we were getting kicked off of Spider-Man?
I think so.
We
yeah,
were on Spider-Man.
86. Yeah.
Yeah, we were on Spider-Man, and things weren't going great on Spider-Man. So, I mean, it was nice to be. It was my first experience creating something from the ground up with DeFalco, which, is something I've always enjoyed doing. And that first experience was no different. I mean, he's a fantastic collaborator. Just the back and forth, the lack of ego, it's like I said, it's all the same things that working with Joe Duffy primed me for, that kind of collaboration. And, when Tom and I first met at a convention, he was my editor on Team Up. we realized sitting over dinner that we just enjoyed the same kind of comics. You know, what he calls hoo-ha Marvel action, you know, that kind of thing, is very much my wheelhouse as well, and what I enjoy doing. And the fact that we are kind of speaking the same language, we have the same purpose in mind, we have the same end product in mind, has always made it a very hand-in-glove type of an experience. And it was no different with Kickers. Unfortunately, what we were working towards isn't necessarily what Shooter was thinking, isn't necessarily what the editors were thinking. And you know, looking back on it now, it required a completely different approach than what we gave it. It may have succeeded had we tried, you know, had I been in a position professionally to treat it differently, to handle it differently.
Right.
So I only stuck around for like 3 issues. I think Tom's plot stuck around for another 2 issues or something. And what the book became was like, oh, okay, if that's what they want it to be, that's what it is, you know, that kind of thing. You know?
Right.
I actually at one point had a pitch. I never got it past the Falco. I mean, we never really made the pitch to Marvel to do a 616 Kickers, because what we were really wanted to do with Kickers would be more appropriate in the 616 universe. You know, it would be broader, and it would be dealing with more science fiction-y concepts and all that kind of stuff, much like the original Challengers did. You know, Challengers again. No. So yeah, I you know, tweaked a few of the characters and gave them new outfits and kind of pitched it as a 616 thing, and we really didn't have anybody to pitch it to, so never went anywhere.
But it was a good learning experience for you, though, all in all.
All in all, it was a positive. Those first 3 issues were very positive because the people I was working with, I don't think, you know, our final editor, I don't think he was really happy with the work I was doing. And I think he might have even had a sense that, you know, we didn't know what the hell we were doing. And I mean, I would say that I don't know to what level any of that applied to the other books, but it's a possibility. Those books were finding themselves for their, no matter how long the book ran, and I don't know what was the longest running book. Was
Starbrand?
Starbrand was probably the longest running one.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's a perfect example. That book was trying to find itself for its entire run.
Right.
And I think the entire New Universe concept was constantly trying to find its footing. You know, it might have been a little ahead of its time, basically. You know, I mean, I'll give Jim Shooter that. I do think the concept was a little ahead of its time. But, you know, early on in development, there was just, you know, you had his singular vision, but it was like a light beam being shot through a diamond, because he was shooting it. He had to shoot his vision through dozens and dozens of other creative people.
Right.
And the spread of that, you know, I mean, I belong to a Facebook page that's, you know, still celebrating the New Universe and the people that were big fans of the New Universe and everything. And I think that's great. I think it's wonderful. I think there was some really strong stuff being done.
Right.
I even came back after the pit and after the war. I did a backup with Jack Magnaconti joining the service and everything. You know, him becoming that pseudo Captain America character and everything. Joe Sinnott and I came back and did a little 5 or 10 page backup or something in one of the books to take him to that next level. And, you know, so, I mean, I certainly, it didn't leave a bad taste in my mouth. It was the first time I got to work Sal Buscema. Sal Buscema inked the first issue. And that was a huge fanboy thing for me, you know, because at that point I had no idea I was going to end up working with him as much as we did. You know, I mean, I certainly didn't get to really talk to him or get to know him at all during that. But
right.
in years to come, I would get that opportunity. So
that's pretty awesome.
So,
question for you. And so, in discussing, you know, new universes,
a question. What is this, an interview or something?
I'm sorry. I'm just, you know, recording and hosting the whole thing, but you know, that's okay. Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So, you know, since we're on the topic of new universes, it seems like the big two are always
Would that be
No.
Marvel and DC or Archie and Image or
I'm going to go with
W and Charlton?
I'm going to go with ECW and WW. No, I'm going. Yeah, so DC and Marvel.
Okay.
You know, every few years there is what appears to be a reboot or some major event that kind of restarts everything. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's stupid. But that's nobody's. That's way above my pay grade. And
Yeah,
believe me, Joe, nobody cares what I think. Even Oren doesn't care what I think. So
that's
I
why
will talk openly about it. I think this industry would be much better served by, experimenting with format
Mhm.
and distribution and doing solid stories that bring the readers back. If you're going to do comics, if you still want to do monthly comics, then do a solid serialized comic.
Yeah.
If you want to do graphic novels, do graphic novels. I think for years we should have experimented with format and stayed on the newsstands while there was still the newsstand. I mean, there's not newsstands anymore.
Right.
But when there were still newsstands, I think we made a huge mistake in not changing our format to meet their needs rather than just go into the comic shops and kind of shut ourselves off from the general, mass media. Because, like the stuff that's being done now in the movies is most similar to the stuff we were doing in the 70s and 80s. I mean, it's mass market. It's for everybody. There's something for the kids. It doesn't shut out the kids. It doesn't shut out the civilians. The civilians are going and loving it.
Right.
That's what Stan was doing starting in the 60s and into the 70s and 80s. And that's what it was, a matter of just maintaining whatever distribution was necessary to get it in front of the largest audience was always the question. When we went into comic shops, originally it looked like a great idea, no returnables and, all this kind of stuff. And everybody was happy. But, comic shops are only as good as the person who gets the loan, the business loan to open one up, that kind of thing. And putting ourselves as an industry, putting ourselves at the mercy of people who we didn't vet, to put it bluntly, it cost us over time. It just did. What the answer would be now, I have no idea. I mean, obviously the internet has to be a part of it. If we monetize it a little better, that would be fantastic. But I don't know. I don't know exactly. Formats that are just available through Amazon and bookstores and things like that, while there are still bookstores, might be an answer. I know a lot of people are just buying the trades now. I mean, but then a lot of people are just going to the library and taking out the trades and returning them too.
Yeah.
So, there's so many different ways to acquire the material now, some of which don't even involve money going back to the publishers, that I don't know. I don't know exactly what the future holds. I have spent 30 some years avoiding the business end of this industry like the plague. Usually Tom DeFalco says something and I go, that sounds interesting. And the next time we have a conversation, I kind of regurgitate it and somebody goes, oh, well, would you take that one step further? And I said, I would have to check with Tom DeFalco's brain to have any.
It seems like there's no new, for the most part, no new fresh content or no, let me rephrase that. There's new content, but it's just rehashing the same characters or reframing them.
Well, that's probably a fair assessment. I think there's still a lot of mileage in the genre. Like right now, I'm working with his outfit, Sit Comics, out of California, and the publisher, Darren Henry, he's a child of the 70s. He wants to do all ages comics. He wants to do some humor books. He wants to do superhero books. He wants to do, he does like a pastiche of an Archie type of a thing. He's the variety is there, all under the same umbrella of this binge book format, where it's going to be 60 some pages for $5. Now, for $5 or $4? For $5. And I just read that a regular Batman comic is going to be $6 now.
Yeah.
It's wow. And I have also seen back and forth on Facebook where the fans are saying, I'd be willing to go back to newsprint. I mean, I love newsprint. I came in on 12 cents in newsprint.
Mm-hmm.
I would love newsprint, but there are fans who would never be willing to go back to newsprint. So you get what you get. I don't know where the industry is going to end up. I honestly don't. I do think that our best bet, the people that are screaming against inclusiveness in characters and in creatives are idiots, and there's a small-minded people who want to bitch. They want everything to stay the same, and guess what? It's not going to stay the same. I'm 61 years old. The one thing I've learned above all else is that nothing, especially things I want to, nothing stays the same. Okay.
No, I mean, you could still go back and read.
Just turned 90. Yeah. No, he's eternally 35, talking about the horrors of war. That means I got to be 61. I don't like this.
Catches up to you, man.
Sad state of affairs. So at what point did you decide to, well, Oren, I don't mean to jump on you if you had another Marvel question, but
could you even do that? You're in two different locations, aren't you?
Physically, no, but
mentally, I'm right still, over you, Oren.
So it's an abusive relationship we're talking about.
You've seen it firsthand, yeah.
We've been friends for a long time. At what point did you decide to go to DC?
I didn't.
Okay. Good night, everybody.
Necessity is the mother of change and panic. I would have been happy being a Marvel guy for the rest of my natural life.
Okay.
I've always loved DC. I grew up reading. I said the first comic was World's Finest. I love Superman. I love Batman. The New Look Batman was my jam. Yeah, I mean, I'm good friends with Brett Breeding. I love the Death of Superman stuff they did and everything.
I just friend requested him on Facebook today.
Well, I'm sure if he sees
just saying,
he'll be quicker to accept you as a friend.
No. This is I'll be sure to edit this and put it out tomorrow.
It was his pro page, not his personal page, right?
I think so. I think it's his pro page, unless he had Superman.
Did it have Doomsday on his icon?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, that would be a pretty messed up personal page.
I don't keep two pages. I don't have a personal page because I have no personal life. Anyway, what was the question?
Going to
DC. Yes. Thunderstrike was selling incredibly well, along with a lot of other books that were selling incredibly well. But Marvel had come under the ownership of a gentleman named Ron Perlman, who is a big poo-poo head. And he hires a bunch of poo-poo heads.
Not to be confused with Hellboy Ron Perlman, right?
They had a big meeting at my eyes. I will stand by the poo-poo head thing.
Okay.
If you can get him on another little box, and I'll tell him right to his face that he's a poo-poo head. But anyway, his people owned the company. And his people had a big meeting with people from Marvel, and my friend, who's almost as unto a brother to me, Tom DeFalco, was at that meeting. And at that meeting, one of Perlman's peoples, who got paid for such opinions, said, you know what we need to do? We need to cancel half the Marvel line so that the half that's left sells twice as well. And Tom laughed, and then he realized, oh, you're serious. Oh, that's not how publishing works. Because if you cancel a kid's favorite title, he's not going to pick another favorite title. He's going to buy a soda and a slice of pizza and play a video game. So you're giving up market share with no plan to make up the rest. I mean, you're giving up half your market share, assuming that these books are going to sell twice as well because you're going to force readers over to the other. That's not how publishing works. And at that moment in that meeting, he knew, well, I'm going to get fired. He did. And that's what they did. They canceled Thunderstrike. They canceled half the line. Thunderstrike was selling fine, but it didn't get canceled because of sales. It got canceled because of this plan. War Machine was selling fine. Force Works was selling fine. A lot of these books that were the spin-offs were selling great. And of course, I'm sitting there chewing hard going, okay, well, I can understand we're going to cancel Thunderstrike. They're not going to cancel Thor, right? But then a couple of years later, they hired the Image guys to come and fix everything. And what was one of the things they did? They canceled Thor. That made me want to kick a puppy. And I love it. So anyway, Thunderstrike gets canceled through no fault of its own, or mine, or Tom's, or anybody's. And Mark Grunwald tried very, very hard. I was under contract at the time, so he tried very, very hard to find me work. I had several phone conversations with Mark where he was trying desperately to manage an unmanageable situation. I mean, people were getting fired and people were quitting, and it was bloody. And he finally had to call me at one point and say, Ron, I've really tried, but there's nothing. I'm sorry. And I said, Mark, thank you for what you've done. I just heard from Mike Carlin, who, Brett Breeding let him know that Thunderstrike was ending. Carlin would never consider poaching talent. But when he heard that I was available, I had done the 2 Superman annuals prior to that, and he was interested in having me come on board the Superman books. I said, Mark, thank you so much for everything you've done. I can't thank you enough. I have somewhere to land. You have plenty of other things to worry about. So we parted friends, and I have nothing but good things to say about Mark Grunwald. Professionally, or even what little personal interaction I had with him, he's just a wonderful, wonderful human being. And Carlin gave me somewhere to land, so I went over to the Superman books for a couple of years, and it saved my ass. I mean, and you make good money, but that's a tough gig, my friend. I'll tell you. I have nothing but respect for the guys who did it for any period of time. Mike Carlin's a freaking god for being able to put together that kind of talent and ride herd on it. It's tough. It's tough. And by the time I got there, Mike had been promoted to some kind of a managing editor, executive editor. So I worked under 2 other different editors, Casey Carlson and Joey Cavalieri. And both of them were desperately trying to do the same job that Mike Carlin did with, veteran Superman people who alternately had, overinflated opinions of themselves, or, were bored with the whole concept, or resentful of the fact that they weren't getting what they thought they should be getting as far as returns, and we're also missing Mike, because Mike knew how to handle the fact that he was able to ride herd on those guys for as long as he did is incredible. I mean, he will never get enough credit creatively for what he was able to produce with that group of guys. And nothing against that group of guys. There's some creative geniuses in that group. That's why I'm so impressed. But when I got there, you're basically doing weekly books. So you get a script, you got to turn around layouts quickly. You got to turn around everything quick. You don't have time to sit with the work. You don't have time to think about it. You just got to produce for the next guy in the line. And it was tough, man. I did some we did bi-weekly runs on Thor that were nothing compared to trying to work on Superman. I mean, it was tough. It was work, and it paid really well. And then, of course, they came up with the idea of trying to do something with the blue suit. So that
was Superman Red and Blue.
Well, that was that. I mean, they ended up picking my design for Superman Blue. So when the time came to try to do something after Superman gave up the suit, which because of Venom, because of, that's what you do, right?
Right.
You develop a new character around that costume. And they gave me the opportunity to work on that. And that was originally supposed to be an open-ended series. So I left to work on that. It ended up just being like 4 issues. And in the meantime, they hired a whole new team and a new editor and everything for Superman.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, by the time that happened, we had already done the Spider-Girl What If, and Marvel was interested in developing MC2. So when I was told, one, Strange Visitor is not going to go to series, and two, you're not welcome back on Superman, I was able to go, okay. And luckily I had somewhere else to go, which was back over to Marvel to help Tom DeFalco develop MC2. And that's what I did. So, I mean, you know, the Angels have been looking out for me a lot. You know, the worst period was after I was fired off of Spider-Man, and I gave back a graphic novel, Punisher graphic novel, because I just didn't feel I was up to the task. It was written by Joe Duffy. It was ultimately drawn by, no, I'm not going to be able to remember his name. Why did I even bring this up?
Which one was it?
Jorge Safino.
Okay.
Jorge Safino. It involved the Yakuza and all this kind of stuff. It was really, It was a gorgeous package by when it was finally produced. I couldn't have done anything even close. So I gave that back. So I had like no work. And the first work I got were the Thor fill-ins from Ralph Macchio and the Superman annual from Mike Carlin, which were the beginning of me rebuilding my confidence and rebuilding a career. And they all led to wonderful things. So, you know, I mean, the Thor fill-ins led to a run on Thor, and the second Superman annual, and then when Thor led to Thunderstrike, and Thunderstrike went away, and I got hired on Superman, and so on and so forth. So,
yeah, it seems like you definitely keep coming back to Thor.
And
I love him, by the way. Like the
bad place to land, you know. I mean, I love the character, but
yeah.
I mean, we just got to do that 10-page Thunderstrike thing for.
That was the Unworthy.
The Worthy.
Oh, Worthy. Excuse me.
That's a different thing. Yeah, I don't know where the idea for the one shot came from, but you know, it was 10 pages working with DeFalco. The only thing Keith Williams came in and saved our ass and did a terrific job inking it. I would have loved to have had to go down Milgram, but he had just gone through some hand surgery. I was not able.
No, I like what they've done with Thor recently. They've given a unbelievably powerful character real challenges, and I think it's hard to do. You know, it's like that's one of I keep coming back to him, but like as much as I love Superman as a character, as you could tell from all the crap I have, I mean, it's the hardest thing to do is give him a challenge. So,
Really?
a worthwhile challenge. So when you have a character like Thor,
you just make it up.
I know, but
That's
still,
that's what they're paying you to do.
No one's paying me to do it.
I understood that. I mean, Superman's a really powerful character, right? So you make up another character that's as strong as Superman. I mean, like when we were on Spider-Man, we made up two characters that were faster than Spider-Man. Puma and Mongoose was going to be the same thing, but Mongoose never really got to fight Spider-Man at the one time in Thor. But we had originally designed Mongoose for Spider-Man. But that was the whole thing with Puma, is that he's so fast that Spider-Man's spider sense isn't protection. He's still going to get his ass scratched because Puma is that fast, you know.
Right.
So I always felt the same way about Superman. We did that Superman Beyond one shot, and in the course of it, we were trying to lay the seeds. It was supposed to lead to us doing online Superman Beyond stories for DC, and through a miscommunication, that gig went to somebody else. It happens. I don't think it was based on anybody's opinion of what we did in the one shot. At least I wasn't told it was, but maybe they're just trying to protect my feelings. Because that, the comics industry was worried about how people feel about this. So in the course of that, we were creating a villain, I mean, because I remember Mongol, Mongol can go toe to toe with Superman.
Yeah.
But it's make one up,
Right. Well, yeah, you can always.
I agree with what you're saying in theory that you have to continually challenge the character. That I completely agree with. You're absolutely right. But when your, when your job, when your edict is create, then create, and so. That's I don't I don't think it's about necessarily bringing Superman down to. I mean, see, I've always loved Superman, but for a completely different reason. I don't love Superman for his power level. I love Superman for the fact that he is basically a kid from Kansas. Genetically, he's a demigod from another planet that's solar powered and everything. But what I love about Superman is Clark Kent. And, you know, Superman, anytime I get a chance to work on Superman, and anytime I get a chance to, well, we had a line in Superman Beyond that Tom and I came up with where he comes back to the Clark Kent identity. And old Bruce Wayne from Batman Beyond says, I think you're back to the glasses bit. And he said, this is, you know, Clark Kent is who I am, Bruce. Lois Lane knew me the best, and she never stopped calling me Smallville. This isn't a disguise, you know. So that's who he is. And whatever he can do and whatever the things that can be done to him, he sees himself as Clark Kent from Smallville, Kansas. He's shouldering an incredible responsibility. So I've never been a big fan of the imagery of Superman floating above as a savior with glowing red eyes. You know, and all this kind of, that's never been my take on the character. My take on the character has always been that good man from Smallville, Kansas, who is shouldering the responsibilities of a demigod. And not that people don't see him that way and don't try to foist that upon him, but, you know, he's conflicted with how he deals with that. You know? So, I mean, there was that one line in Superman Returns. I don't want to get sidetracked too far here, but because Bryan Singer and I kind of disagreed on this, as if we were sitting across a table from each other. I'm just a guy. Anyway, he had that line in his movie where Lois Lane says, the world doesn't need a savior. And it would have been a perfect opportunity for Brandon Routh to say, I don't want to be anybody's savior. I just want to be a friend, like Christopher Reeve said, right? Instead, he goes, really? Because I float up in orbit and all I hear is people crying for help and all this. And no, you're not. No, Superman is not accepting that responsibility. Superman is not saying, I am here to save you. You know, he's there to set an example. He's there to do what he can. But on some level, the guy obviously has accepted he can't do everything. I mean, otherwise he'd be nuts by now. I mean, we actually pitched a story when I was on the Superman books where he stopped sleeping because he's trying to do too much. And because it was established back in the 70s that if he don't sleep, he gonna go a little crazy. He needs the psychological release of sleep. And it became the basis of what they ended up doing with that Superman King of the World run.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of.
Dan Jurgens introduced Dominus.
Yes.
Dominus was subtly controlling him and everything. But the original concept was just Clark was trying to do too much. And he stopped sleeping, and he didn't need it physically, but it started to cost him psychologically. And he started basically Our original concept was he actually started sleepwalking and disarming nations of their nuclear weapons at night and not remembering it.
Wow.
And it became, things started rolling out of control, and he had to make the choice of like stopping it here and now and admitting to something that he didn't think was a good thing to admit to. And it was all very character motivated. It was all very scary. It was all based on John Byrne basically doing the origin of Kal-El's code against killing by having remember when he executed the Phantom Zone criminals, and everybody lost their shit because Superman doesn't kill. And it's like, well, that's because he's telling his origin of his code against killing, that kind of thing. And the guys that took over the book from there had him go PTSD on that and go deal with it.
That was one of the things.
Story we originally wanted to tell.
Yeah, you make a good point. That was one of the things that I think people give, and I'll stop this line of questioning afterwards because I'm probably going.
I went off. You go off.
No, it's because you brought up a very good point in talking to another person about it. Is just the Zack Snyder stuff. Either you love it or hate it. That's fine. But there was in the Man of Steel movie where he has to kill Zod. He's given that he has that choice to make, and he makes it. And he just it's one of the few parts of that movie that really resonate with me. He just lets out this guttural scream after doing so, and you could tell, okay, well, that's the moment where he, mentally makes that decision not to kill. Like you could, not only did he just kill someone, he killed another Kryptonian.
Right. That would have been
So
a perfect thing to build on. I mean, the issue is, whether or not Superman. I don't know whether the movie earned that moment, and there was also this problem with the movie didn't seem to believe, and maybe it's Zack Snyder. I don't know Zack Snyder personally, of course, but he seems to have a hard time believing in heroes and believing in doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
What term do we want to use for that? There's a word that's not coming to my old brain, but I forget what it is. But some people believe in that some people believe that's the core of Superman. I mean, one of the ways to look at Superman, one of the ways I've always kind of looked at Superman is he has the biggest case of survivor's guilt in the history of the universe, because he has to have there has to be a reason that he survived the destruction of Krypton. He has to decide what that reason is.
Mm-hmm.
I think Kevin Costner does say something similar to him in Man of Steel. So yeah, my whole point with Clark Kent is that he's dealing with a lot. I mean,
yeah.
At one point, Tom DeFalco and I were discussing the character. We weren't even working on the character together, but he always said he had a hard time getting a handle on the Superman character. And I said, well, he said, I gave him this scenario. I said, okay, Superman's out in the middle of nowhere. Just having a moment where he's having his own thoughts. And because it was part of a story that I was working on at that moment with the writer of Superman. And another character comes walking out of the woods, and he just kind of happens to run into this other character to further the story. And Tom said, okay, Superman is a character. What does Superman say to that girl? And Tom said, I have no idea. And I said, first thing Superman says to that girl is, do you need help with something? How can I help you? Superman, Clark Kent, is codependent with the entire human race. He is here to help. And that is an incredible burden, because he believes that on some level, he believes that is his reason for still existing. Now he's come to realize that he has to also survive to do that. And he, so he can't spend every single minute helping other people,
Right.
But that's all about him trying to maintain his own mentality, his own mental health. And boy, did we get into Superman. Okay. What are we talking about now?
Well, I'm good. You guys go ahead and chat. We can talk about Green Lantern next, and then I'll be a happy guy.
All of this means absolutely nothing, because it's just my opinion as a fan.
No, are you kidding me? It means everything. That's why we're here.
I just wanted to jump back to Spider-Man because...
Oh, this guy with Spider-Man. No, I'm kidding.
I just think it's like you're given one of the biggest characters in comic history.
Yeah.
And you took over for Romita?
Romita Jr. and Roger Stern, yeah.
Okay, so two big shoes to fill. You get
yes. Yeah, well, we followed Walt on Thor, too. So, I mean, they keep handing us tough acts to follow. Yeah. And all we can do is what we do. Yeah.
I was going to say, you get the call to do Spider-Man. Are you allowed to draw it any way you like, or are you told, let's kind of keep it the way it's been for a little
Anybody that believes that there is an impressive Marvel style, is wrong.
Right.
When I did the Kid Who Collects Spider-Man, this is as close as it's ever come. When I did Kid Who Collects Spider-Man, now remember, this was all pre Todd McFarlane and, pre the artist as a superstar type of stuff and everything, right? But when I did the Kid Who Collects Spider-Man, there was not a lot of action in the story, of course, okay? He's interacting with Tim Harrison. He's standing around a lot. He's sitting. He's prone. I wanted it to be Spider-Man. I wanted it to if you look at the page, there's no way you're not seeing Spider-Man. So I pulled out all my Ditko, and I even pulled out really early Ditko, and I wanted him to be that guy. I wanted him to be Ditko's Spider-Man as he's standing around and interacting with the kid. On one of the shots, I even did one of the things that Ditko did occasionally, where he did the webbing on the mask more like a flower petal than the spider web, you know, because he would do that occasionally. He wasn't locked in to a you know, the whole corporate "this is what Spider-Man looks like" thing didn't happen until well into the Romita period, when they started doing cartoons and they started doing things with other things with Spider-Man and licensing, right? That came with more licensing. The editor, Danny Fingerroth, was not sure he was going to leave that. He wasn't sure he was going to let the webbing stand. He seriously considered having Romita as art director come in and fix the webbing. To his credit, he didn't, because he understood where I was coming from with it. He knew that Ditko had done that. So he didn't have it fixed. He had Terry Austin ink it the way I penciled it, and the job ended up, everybody loves the job. It's something I'm still very proud of to this day. That's the closest that anybody's ever come to that kind of thing, you know? I mean, but earlier, I mean, because when McFarlane came along, he just blew the doors off of everything. I mean, the story I heard from Inside Marvel is that the editor on Spider-Man was very close to firing Todd because he didn't get Todd. Then the mail started coming in, and the fans love Todd. Right. And, you know, guys like John Romita are going like, what is the attraction? But there was no denying that the fans just embraced his, whatever you want to call it, his, you know, I don't know, creative
uniqueness, I guess.
Uniqueness is, you know, I mean, one of the theories was that the kids, when they're doodling in their sketchbook, you know, it looks more like a Todd McFarlane drawing. You know, it doesn't look like it requires anything other than unbridled creativity, rather than, you know, a vast knowledge of anatomy or anything like that, you know. And you know, I don't know how Todd feels about it. He's somebody else I've never met or talked to. But, you know, so then the doors got blown off. And now, quite frankly, it kind of concerns me that the artists are given as much free reign as they are, because I think I'm not a big continuity buff, like every little thing about continuity, but consistency, I think, is important to a character's longevity. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, you know, I don't think Spider-Man needs a new costume. I mean, what Ditko came up with was like fantastic. When I came on board around the time of the black costume, I like everybody else, I thought it was a huge mistake. Why are you recreating the best costume ever designed by man? You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about this because you made such a good point a second ago that you took the time, excuse me, to put the detail in the mask because, you know, it took you back to Ditko. Then you find out, okay, it's going to be just a black and white costume.
Right.
There's no detail for you to put in.
Right.
It's an outline. It's colored in. What was going on behind the scenes with this? Was this is going to be a huge push, or is this let's try it out and see where we go from here?
If you haven't heard the stories, I'll tell you the stories. Now remember, of course, that Secret Wars was set up where everybody leaves 1 month and comes back the next month.
Right.
And for the next 12 months, Secret Wars is going to be running. Okay. So Spider-Man gets the costume in 252, which comes out around the time that the first issue of Secret Wars is coming out. He doesn't get the costume in Secret Wars until like issue, 7 or 8?
I think it's 8, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So here's what happened with the costume. This is back in the age of snail mail. Kids, let's go back to when you had to crank your car and the phones didn't have dials on them and you just had to call for Sarah and there was no email. Okay.
What?
That's where we are now. But anyway, the snail mail was completely negative on the concept of changing Spider-Man's costume. When it was announced in the fan press at the time that we were going to mess with the costume, everybody hated the idea. It got so bad that Shooter came to DeFalco and said, "What issue are you giving him the black costume in?" And he goes, "Issue 252." And he goes, "Get rid of it in 253. We're getting hammered." And Tom said, "We can't do that." And Shooter said, "What do you mean we can't do that?" And he says, "Listen, the whole setup is he doesn't get it for 8 months in Secret Wars. We can't get rid of it in Amazing Spider-Man before he even gets it in Secret Wars. That's not playing fair with the readers." You know, this was one of the big holy crap changes that happened in Secret Wars, that everybody's reading Secret Wars to find out how he got it, you know, that kind of thing. And Shooter had to admit that's completely logical. That's how storytelling works. Okay. He says, but the month after he gets it in issue 8 of Secret Wars, he gets rid of it. If you do the count, that's pretty much what happened. It was the issue of Spider-Man that comes out the month after issue 8 of Secret Wars is when he goes to Reed Richards, finds out it's a symbiote, and gets rid of it, and we do Bagman and all that kind of stuff. Okay? Now, in the meantime, in those ensuing 8 months, when people saw the costume in 252, everybody loved it. They thought it was the coolest thing since sliced bread. I did a convention in Canada that was just like insane. The crowd was nuts. Everybody thought they were going to buy a copy of this and send their kids to college. It was crazy.
We've had those discussions.
Exactly. It was just crazy time. But in the meantime, you know, we've started getting mail about how fantastic this is and how ballsy it was and what a great success it was and all this kind of stuff. So it's like, you know, as soon as we got rid of the suit, somebody said, well, we got to bring the suit back. Right. You know, so we came up with the idea of Black Cat liked the suit better, so she makes him a cloth one, and he's switching back and forth, and we brought back the symbiote, and you know, Michelini came up with the idea. Well, DeFalco's the one that came up with the idea that it was alive, right, and it was a symbiote, because he went to Shooter and said, "So what's the deal? How can it do all these things it does?" He goes, "I don't know. You figure it out." So he came up with the idea that it was a living thing bonding with Pete. But Michelini is the one that came up pretty much from the ground up with Venom. If you read Michelini's original plot, he describes Venom.
It was supposed to be a woman too, wasn't it? Venom was supposed to be...
Well, very early on, there was talk about it being a woman that lost. But by the time it was decided it was a guy, by the time it was decided it was going to be Brock, it's what stunned me, because everybody always gets co-credit. The writer always shares credit with whoever drew the book, you know, that kind of thing. And not to take anything away from Todd McFarlane as a creative force, but if you read Michelini's plot, he describes Venom to a T. You know, I mean, because early on, my thought would have been, I would have gone thinner with him. I would have gone, you know, thinner and scary and liquidy and all this kind of stuff. I never would have made him big and brutish and huge and all that kind of stuff. But it was in Michelini's description that he was big and huge and hawkish and the terrifying grin, you know, and all. Because remember, the tongue came later. The tongue, I think, was even more Eric Larson.
Eric Larson, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the sharp teeth all came later. Because I when we were doing we did the symbiote in Spider-Girl, and I went back to the original symbiote stories, as I always do with every character I work on. I always go back to the original. Right. And I was shocked that he didn't have sharp teeth and he didn't have the tongue all the time, you know, that kind of thing. So I tried to bring some of that back in. I kind of mixed and matched, but I tried to bring that grin back in that McFarlane gave him. But yeah, that was all on the page. It was all described on the page by Michelini. So. Right. And it's pretty fascinating, but you know, and then once that happened, they came up with the reasoning. You know, now that Venom had that look, he had terrorized MJ, and MJ was never going to want to see that black costume again. So, you know, now pretty much every third commission I do is either Spider-Man black costume or Hobgoblin. So. And I had nothing to do with designing either one of them. You know, I'm just benefiting from their popularity. So.
Well, let me ask you about this, because Marvel's putting a lot into this. It's going to be a big change. are you having a lot of eyes on you for what you're going to do with this, how it's going to look, or were you able to, you know?
Well, like I said, it was designed by Mike Zack.
Right.
Do you guys have a huge following? Just say yes.
Sure.
Yes, sure.
Millions of fans, yeah.
Okay. So maybe I can tell this story one more time, and it'll keep it from still being misquoted.